Welcome to the Fermynwoods Contemporary Art Podcast, guest curated and presented by Subterra. In search of solace in this precarious world, we emerge from ocular darkness. Rays of light pierce through the nocturnal, and in these twinkling soundscapes, we are reminded that we are part of something greater than ourselves. As we navigate these curious and luminous spaces, we will explore artist talks, discussions, and original commissioned sound art. Hello everyone, and welcome to our final Love and Light episode of the podcast. For a while now, we've known that this season would be closed off with a very special episode by Sapphire Goss. Our regular listeners will know that over the last couple of seasons, Sapphire has created the ethereal and chimerical videos that accompany each episode, adding a whole new layer and dimension to every sound work that is produced on this podcast. Sapphire is an artist who works with moving image, photography, and other lens-based methods. She uses obsolete technologies to create chimerical imagery, using unexpected materials, looping and processing to make an analog uncanny, grainy, shimmering, otherworldly, bursts of light and emotion that are moving and mysterious. But in this new audio work by Sapphire, entitled Light-Sensitive Materials, the luminescence that we are so accustomed to seeing in her video work is transubstantiated into audible vibrations, offering a rare insight into how light, dark, and everything in between might sound. The name Light-Sensitive Materials comes from an old chemical company in the former USSR and Ukraine called SVEMA, an abbreviation which translates to light-sensitive materials in Russian. This audio work is created with the sonification of film reels, in essence, taking their luminance and creating audio from them. And within this sensitive process, using software she has dubbed the Celluloid Synthesiser, Sapphire could adjust the parameters like tone and pitch to compose the desired sounds and effects. One of the most fascinating things about this audio is that many of the sounds come from the holes punched at the end of film reels, the black at the edge of frames, scratches and dust. These are then mixed with a selection of field recordings on tape and audio samples from the USC Optical Sound Effects Library. The result is a haunting and complex body of sounds which explore every aspect of light and dark, the extractive origins and realities of film processing, death, decay, and so much more. And, very excitingly, these tracks are going to be released on cassette tape as a whole album for those who want to experience it in its physical form. All of the information about this will be at the end of the episode. So, without further ado, here is Light-Sensitive Materials by Sapphire Goss, with a conversation between myself and Sapphire interpolated throughout the tracks.
Whole complex. I started off making films by working with musicians, and I'd done that a long way through, all the way through, really. But interestingly, it's about the time I started working with analog film that I decided it was about time to start doing my own soundtracks. And first of all, I was using samples from these old 16mm public information films, stuff like that, and then some random field recordings. I just record stuff on my phone, like trains or the sound of boats or the sea and things like that, and add those in and play with that. And yeah, I'd always wanted to make something because I'd done so many visual responses to audio, and I use VDMX for that. I was like, oh, it'd be so cool if you could do like audio responses to visual. And eventually I found this program. I tried it with a few things, and a lot of the time it sounded awful, just like noise, basically. But yeah, I found this program where you could do it, and it was more like a synth sound, and it was really beautiful and like something that I would listen to anyway, you know, and you could change all the parameters. So what it is, it's like you feed it the visual signal and it makes sound responses to that in real time. And you can change like the pitch, you can change the sort of the sound of it. Yeah, and just like play around with it really until you get something really nice. And then you can start to do different parts of the image to make chords and things like that. And yeah, like the low passes and the hard passes. So it's like using that and sort of playing it out to tape. So I got the same degraded quality as the visuals. And I've started to call that like the celluloid synthesizer, because I'm taking the real-time visual of the film and yeah, making audio from it, and yeah, working with it in the same way, and still using those field recordings a little bit, although not so much in the pieces you're listening to, because this is more like sound stuff. But I would use that more in the soundtracks, if that makes sense. So these are like a standalone sound piece, but I'd use more field recordings and sound effects in a soundtrack. So these are they still feel like soundtrack. But they are sort of standalone pieces, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. It like feels almost like, I mean, it feels like an album in a way, you know, listening through to everything. It doesn't feel like, I mean, like knowing, and this is something we'll talk about, but knowing that they come from visuals is really fascinating and kind of, but then what's interesting as well is that everyone listening to them will have different images in their mind's eye floating around in response to the sound. So it's like this, you know, feedback loop which I know that is something that you're thinking about as you're producing the work as well. So, yeah. And we haven't seen it yet, but it'll be really interesting to also kind of have the video playing that you will have made as well, as you have for every episode over the last, what is it, like 3 years? I don't know. Long time anyway.
Yeah, 2 seasons, a lot of episodes. What this will be, what, the 20th episode or something?
Yeah, it feels like a very fitting kind of culmination of visuals to kind of see how your work then might translate into sound, which it's a great kind of apex in a way.
Doing this project over the years has sort of helped me, and listening to a lot of other artists' sound work has sort of given me a lot of inspiration in that sense. So, and given me a lot of confidence to work in that way.
You know, I was going through the list of we shared obviously a Google Doc over the last few weeks, like, you know, kind of with a little bit of to and fro about our ideas as you know, I listened to the pieces and read a bit about the work that you were making. And it was really interesting to see that sort of like push and pull between the physical and the metaphysical, because obviously on my end, I was experiencing the work through, you know, just listening to the sound, not maybe fully understanding the physical work that actually goes into creating it. And, you know, seeing your responses, which was, you know, like a real desire to pull this back to the physical, was really, really interesting for me. And I was thinking about how the work is kind of like by focusing so kind of almost at a microscopic level on the physical through all of the kind of patience of like working through these materials, finding, you know, the gaps, the dust, all of these things, that it is that very sort of detailed work that is what creates these almost like apertures that allow us to enter this sort of otherworldliness. And to me, it's just so fascinating that it's through physicality that we can access this other world that feels so abstract. And yeah, so I was wondering if we could maybe talk a bit about that.
Yeah, there's a few different things there, but I think the sort of spectral, ghostly, haunting thing is inextricable from the physical in my work. Like I always say, it's like one foot in the material world and one in the ether. Like it's almost like they're being conjured from these molecules somehow, like these ghosts or these memories. I think, yeah, it's like these material hallucinations, like sort of ghosts in the machine or the mechanics or the chemicals. But yeah, I think there's a sense in my work that it can be quite, it's like sort of like, yeah, beautiful or ghostly or otherworldly. But I always want to bring it back to the physical because we're never divorced from that, really. There's a couple of reasons that we can talk around about that. But in terms of like the actual things that go into making it, even from the start, Kodak always said that film was animal, vegetable, mineral, like alchemy, you know, and the actual things that come out that film are made of. It's like the petrochemicals of plastic, gelatine, which is made from bones of carcasses, very deathly, and then silver, which is like based on extraction, and you know, like all of these are intertwined with like not just physical but very socio-political things as well.
Yeah.
Scratches in the Sunless. I use these, not only these physical things, but these sort of archaic things, but they're also like, I use expired film as well. So film has an expiry date where after which it's not supposed to work anymore. You know, it starts to degrade, like it bears the traces of radiation, background radiation and things like that. And it just sort of, you know, the chemicals start to decay over time. But I'm using like film for this project, the film that is developed and then goes into making the sound. I'm using some of it's from the 1950s or expired in the 1950s. And it's like some of it has, you know, other people's footage emerging from it, or, you know, so it's like these, it's like resurrecting things. It's so it's intertwined, this sort of very material process to create these things that shouldn't exist. Yeah, these spectres or hauntings. And I think, yeah, film and especially cinema in general sort of always has that kind of dichotomy between it. It was always, even one of the first reviews of cinema called it this kingdom of shadows, where everything's grey. It's like, it's not life, but it's traces. I think Gorky said that at first. It's like, and the kingdom of shadows, it's like, it is that as well. It's always that contradiction between, because what we see, there's so many different things. It's like, from like this phantasmagoria as well as this mechanical process. You know, film works because it's not a continuous image. It's like 24 frames a second and there's black in between. There's a mechanism called the Maltese cross or the Geneva drive, and it's like black image, black image, black image. So it's always light, dark, and these like this alchemy that comes from these photomechanical processes. And
I thought it was really interesting reading your some of your writing around these processes, and you know, because obviously it's something that you are very engaged with and very knowledgeable about, and maybe most of us, you know, we just kind of experience them without really thinking about all of these sort of like the fact that basically, as you describe, our brain smooths over all of these separate images to create one thing.
And that's how perception works as well, right? You know, you don't think in, like, you're constantly like making the world around you from fragments, basically, you know. Yeah,
totally. And well, so that's why in our kind of to and fro over the last couple of weeks, considered Neptune as an interesting sort of way to think about your work, which you know, is a planet that I think it's described the planet of mist because it's very misty and it sort of clouds reality in a way. And there's something very like cloudy about the work in the sense that it's incredibly difficult to pinpoint because, as you say, it is like transgressing these two very clear dichotomies of like the physical and the non-physical. But then I found your sort of thinking around what you described as Saturnine and describing your work as Saturnine. I found that absolutely fascinating, mostly because I don't know, it wasn't really a word that I was like so familiar with, and that sort of gloominess, and maybe this kind of can tie into some further thinking around nostalgia, but that sort of gloominess and what you described as the heavy melancholy of collapsing material reality, that heavy melancholy, that is what the work does through acknowledging the silver, the gelatin, these are the things that are being collapsed for us when we consider these materials in the way that you're, you know, allowing that to happen. And that's it's an incredibly difficult process. It's an incredibly complicated process, but it's so important. And yeah, it's just really interesting to see that be pinpointed in such a specific way.
Well, I liked the Neptunian as well because it's like that fog, and like a lot of the tracks called like Fata Morgana. And so I love those optical illusions that are thrown up, partly because I work at the edge of the sea and I see a lot of that sort of thing when I go out and film daily, and they'll be in the film that I'm taking the music from as well. So definitely always thinking about those coastal edges of things, and then and then film as this edge in itself, where that sort of thing happens, where these like aberrations happen, where these optical illusions happen, where things emerge from the fog, you know. So it's definitely that. And then it's bring back to this saturnine, like, heavy melancholy, because I'm using this expired film where the image sort of collapses into the matter, you know, like to start to decay. You know, and I also use the edge of the reels as well. Like, I really like the hole punches at the edge of the reels and where it starts to go dark and where the image starts to decay away. So it's like this, it's always like the image, like this interplay between the image and the things that make up the image. And it's sort of collapsing realities, I think, because you're talking about the materials. I think it's hard not to think about, you know, things like climate collapse, things like, you know, I think everything is political, and definitely the material realities are. Someone who's really good at talking about that sort of violence behind these everyday objects is Lara Pawson. She has this book called Spent Light, where she talks about that, like even the most mundane things like a toaster, and she talks about the sort of things that have gone into making it.
Things that we just take for granted and use every day.
But I think especially that's true of... I mean, I'm obviously using like these quite archaic, well, they're still used materials, but obsolete materials. But it's still a comment on modern things, like everything's like data and the cloud and things like that. And it feels like something ephemeral, but actually data's just eclipsed aviation, I think, in terms of climate impact.
Wow.
So... and obviously like water usage, carbon, things like that. So it's not something that doesn't come with a cost. And, you know, all the rare earth minerals that are mined in the Congo, things like that, all the labour that goes into the manufacture in sweatshops and stuff. We think that we live in somewhere where we live in a time where we're very divorced from that. And I think that trying to use these handmade processes, hand developing, hand wound cameras, you know, it's trying to expose that in different ways, I think, maybe.
Yeah. Well, that was something that you mentioned that I found really interesting, was this Arctic World Archive and the fact that digital culture is being recorded on analog film. Is that correct?
Yes. And again, where we're talking about collapsing, there's an Arctic World Archive where a lot of... you know, university archives and things like that being backed up as data onto 35mm film and stored in this like old mine, which again is like a cyclical thing because, you know, extraction and then put back in. It's because if there's a solar flare, an electromagnetic flare, it will destroy everything that we know, basically. So all data will be gone. And data's fragile anyway, you know. I mean, I lost a lot of my images from university and things like that. It's like the digital dark ages, that sort of time. And also it's like, it's fragile because it's vulnerable to bad actors, you know. Phantasmalaise.
But what I find really interesting, and it harks back to the way you make, is the relationship between analog and anxiety of extinction, but also just the anxiety of being perpetually digital. So I was teaching a little bit earlier this month, and one of the students said that on TikTok, 2026 has been dubbed the year of analog. And like, I know that doesn't just mean photography. It's also, more physical hobbies like, I don't know, knitting or journaling or all these things. And I'm just think that, this relationship between recording ourselves and our lives in the physical rather than on the digital, and this anxiety of, collapse basically, and that the work you're making is actually accessing that through material and also through the outcomes, which are these sort of like otherworldly physical manifestations, So I was wondering what your thoughts were on that. And
well, you kind of need it. It like brings you, it sort of reclaims time in a way, I think, because otherwise nothing feels tangible and everything feels like it's slipping through your fingers. I think we need it, like on a personal level, to go away from the screens for a little bit.
Totally.
Again, I found another fact out that if you stream a song 27 times, it actually uses more energy than if you bought a CD of it. So it'd be good for the environment. If that might not be the exact,
right.
You know what I mean? But,
yeah.
But streaming is it's even better if you download it. So it's like, I think we want something tangible that we can hold on to. And it's not about nostalgia either. It's not about this hipster thing that it perhaps was back when I was growing up.
It's if anything, it's actually the opposite, because it's so future thinking rather than past thinking.
Yeah, and it's accessing something that might be lost. It's not just about nostalgia for something that was. It's about holding on to something that we could have.
Exactly.
That we need.
Yeah. And it is kind of amazing to see the long-term effects of just like living in the digital on people, and how they're like finding ways of going against that, because I guess too much of something is never good. And I just think it's really interesting that the work sits within that kind of context of what's going on with what people are feeling like they need. And
like 20 years ago it was the spectral turn and hauntology and things like that, and now I think it's the way things are going, like towards more of material things, reading like the cinema of extractions and camera geologica. And people are very like, and I studied anthropology as well, so it's always about the systems that underpin things as well,
Yeah, no, definitely. Hauntology is still such a big part of my thinking in my work as well.
Oh, same, me too. Like that's I keep positioning it as like this it has to be one or the other, but it's like, no, it's all of the things.
And the Arctic World Archive, like, and that sort of relationship to the physical, I just found, really, really interesting. And I think it's probably not common knowledge, and it's very good to have that be on the podcast, I think, because I found it like kind of almost jaw-dropping when you told me first. So, yeah. Yeah,
because it's an archive, but it could also end up being a tomb. That's what I always think about archives, because that could be the only thing left if like everything gets erased,
Yeah.
Luminous signals. which, and a lot of my work is like, it feels very deathly in a lot of ways. I've spoken about it in that sense. Because like obviously you're talking about memory and things decaying and things like that. And also like memorial, you know, like films used in so many different ways. Like in that talk, I talk about Thai memorial cinemas, where they project to the ghosts in graveyards for Chinese New Year. And I love the idea of that as well. Like it's like film or media as like this offering as well, like this shrine.
Totally. Yeah. And you know, you mentioned also like sort of the Victorian tradition of spirit photography and, you know, those things. And there is such a sort of, and actually I thought, you know, there was one piece of writing you did where you talked about the triangular kind of, you know, aperture, like all those things. I'm sorry, I'm not a photography expert, but the recording of those, that triangulation as like muttering spells under your breath. And
yes.
I mean, I suppose the darkroom and all of the materials in it are probably one of the closest kind of, and, you know, the use of silver and minerals like that. It must be one of the closest sort of art forms to like medieval alchemy, you know, for that. I always think of it that way anyway.
It 100% feels like that. And like I said, Kodak called it animal, vegetable, mineral. So, you know,
yeah,
which is alchemy. Yeah,
yeah, totally.
And it's like, making something from nothing. It does feel like this invocation sometimes, you know.
Totally.
Yeah, and when it doesn't, especially when you're using such fragile materials that shouldn't work, it feels like when it does work, it feels like magic, definitely. Liquid electricity.
I think that where there's like an interesting crossover in our work is my interest in lenses. And I suppose like, I remember, sorry, this is probably off topic. I remember in Ireland going to this place called Birr Castle, which has one of the largest telescopes in the world, or it was at one point. And you could actually stand inside the barrel of the telescope because it was so big. But it discovered some cosmological thing. I can't remember what it was. But yeah, I think that it's so interesting how the work is like creating sound vibrations based off of the images that you're feeding the program, and images or lack thereof images. And that creates this sort of like almost like Delia Derbyshire-esque type sound that is like, it's got this sort of like they're sort of like drone-like sounds often. There's organ sounds. There's I think it was in Dry Spirits, that track, where it almost sounded like there was like a veil in between the listener and this distant sort of organ, or distant, like almost like fairground type tune, just for a split second, and then it vanished again. And there was this sort of like ominous ambience throughout the whole thing. And those somehow felt cosmological, starlit, astral, all of these sort of, I mean, I felt like I was looking up a lot of the time while listening to it in a sense, I don't know if that relates to how you felt while making it, but for me, they felt somewhere, I don't want to say sci-fi because it's too different to that, but there is something celestial in it, I suppose.
I like that. Well, there's a few different bits there. So you say sci-fi. I just learnt that term slipstream recently.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Quite useful. So it's kind of like a literary sci-fi, things like Ballard and Anna Kavan, who I'm obsessed with at the moment.
Yeah, I read Ice, is it? Is that
yes,
her?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. So all those things that are in between, it's like sci-fi, but it's not about like spaceships. It's more like, speculative or strange. And so, definitely resonate with that sort of thing. Like these are often strange apocalyptic worlds that I'm kind of creating. Because I always dream of apocalypses.
So do I. Yeah.
So and obviously it feels very current for some reason that I can't put my finger on.
Yeah.
But the celestial thing I find really interesting because I think of it like, you know how starlight takes so long to reach us and you're always looking at something in the past. I feel like that is similar to using expired film, and because it's like uncovered imagery that should have been buried, and it like, the chemicals are 50, 70 years old, it's like uncovering something that is latent, like this latent image, I guess. And the last thing, I think you've just mentioned that fairground sound, which I think might be from silent, like it might be a sample from silent film tracks, but I did have a few samples in there from this optical sound effects archive that I found on archive.org, and they were like samples that sound mixers used to carry around with them, and they'd get degraded with more with each recording, and they'd record it and they'd go onto the next tape, because obviously you wouldn't have it, and they'd literally carry it around with them. And some of them were from nitrate film, I think, as well, which so I'm kind of obsessed with nitrate film. I'll never be able to shoot on it because it's basically super flammable, but all early films, that's why a lot of them are lost, are shot on nitrate as opposed to like modern film, which is acetate, like modern plastic, very stable. Right. But nitrate film, it like decays like flesh. It's very flammable. It like, it just basically bursts into flames. Like, so that's like, I think more silent films are lost than, I can't remember what the thing is, but like probably like just like 80% of them or something.
Wow.
Like ridiculous amounts because of this flammable material. And you look at it and it decays in this most beautiful way. There's this film called Decasia, which is just about those points of entropy, I guess. And it just looks incredible. Like like my dream would be to shoot on it, but you never would be able to. I don't think you'd like the health and safety things.
Does anyone work with it anymore? Or is it completely obsolete now?
Not that I know of. I think it's like to run it through a camera, you'd be worried about setting it on fire.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. It's really that dangerous then. How did they work with it before then? Was it just a work hazard? It was like one of the perils of the job, I suppose, at one point.
Well, you see the sort of tricks that Buster Keaton does and stuff. I don't think health and safety was a big concern there.
No, that's fair.
Light sensitive materials.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's, to me, it's again goes back to that thing of like that microscopic focus on things like dust and you know, a black screen for a split second or whatever, like that's the thing that opens out this sort of like astral imagery like that. It's almost like, you know, when you zoom in, I saw recently some microscopic images of human ashes, and they were so celestial looking. And it's the same thing, but just in the sort of audio space, you know?
Yeah, I always love that scaling up and scaling down sort of thing. I'm a huge fan of Italo Calvino, and he's got a book called Cosmicomics, and one called Mr. Palomar, which often does the same thing, taking like, you know, light on water and then it'll become the universe, or, you know, it's just like these extreme shifts in scale between like the molecular and the cosmic. You know? Yeah,
for sure. One thing that I thought was quite interesting that you mentioned in at the end of the document that we shared, you made a couple of points about chronic illness and perception and pain as a psychedelic fracturing process. which I suppose kind of is similar to what I was saying about like this, well, to what we've been saying all along about resurrection and about the physical quality of the film as gelatin, and these ashes being like almost like starlight. So yeah, I was curious about the role of that, of chronic illness and perception, and the body in relation to the work.
Yeah, sure. So I have ankylosing spondylitis, which is like arthritis of the spine, and uveitis, which is kind of like arthritis of the eye, I guess. But one of the symptoms of that is ironically photophobia, which is,
wow.
So you don't like light. So
oh my God.
Being in this dark. I mean, it's an intermittent thing. I get it like once every year and a half or something like that, and quite easily treated. It's a manageable condition, but
sure.
Yeah, but it's just quite ironic. Well, maybe it's not really. Maybe because I did start making work more seriously when I got diagnosed about 10 years ago. So I think, yeah, while I don't like to make the disability like a headline of the work, because I think it can sort of box you in a little bit. I think it's inevitable that would have influenced things, because like chronic pain, I talk about it a lot in terms of this psychedelic thing, because you're always like sort of layered on yourself. You have this other awareness, and sometimes this very cellular awareness of your body at the same time, like you can't fully escape into these realms of the mental, of the dreamlike and stuff like that. So it's like you're always like on two layers, on two levels, which is kind of what we're talking about with what I'm trying to talk about with my work as well. It's like it always exists on this like a spectral and very physical plane. Silver halides.
I find that really interesting because I have fibromyalgia, and so the relationship between like the physical and this like strong desire to escape as it manifests in me sometimes. Yeah, and the work spoke to me on that level because it was kind of a mutual understanding, I think, of like that sort of, yeah, this, like I always think about like ascendance, like I sometimes, like, especially when you're thinking creatively and sometimes it's almost like you have these sort of like manic episodes of just ascendance or something where you're like really truly leaving the planet. and then you'll experience something physical. Your body might be exhausted from all of the work that you're doing in the mental capacity, and then, you know, it brings you right back down to earth. And for me, like that's manifested in like anchor imagery and like that kind of thing. But yeah, I really find that sort of link between the analog and the metaphysical, all of those. I think it's so interesting. And as you say, it gives you as the creator of the work a different perception than maybe others might have because of that physical lived experience as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I love that. Yeah, that anchor imagery as well. Like, that does sometimes feel like that, you know. And it's sort of, like that fight between them, or that oscillation between them, I think.
Yeah,
those
totally.
two states. Well, or all the states, or sometimes the concurrent things laying over each other, you know.
Yeah, and battling each other. And sometimes feels like, anyway.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, another thing that maybe feeds into that in a similar way was, you know, you mentioned how does it affect your vision, or it's kind of like a desire to be kind of in the dark kind of thing, or how does that work?
When you have it, like, it hurts to look at light, basically.
Right.
And you, so it's just an ironic thing because you're like, I'm dealing with light all the time. And actually, like, this album's called Light Sensitive Materials. So, you know. Yeah. Which is based on, that was actually from this factory in the Ukraine called, well, I can't say it in Russian, but it's basically that SVEMA, which is short for the Russian word for light sensitive materials. And I thought it was quite appropriate because of the sound being made from light in both ways, in the actual like sonification and using the optical soundtracks as well. But yeah, so that link between the eye thing, I always don't forget about it, but you know what I mean? I didn't necessarily make that until then.
Yeah.
But it's also like when you're at the ophthalmologist and you're like looking in the slit lamp and you see these like spectres and stuff, and yeah, I mean, must have influenced me in some way.
Yeah, definitely. I imagine so. Yeah. Well, so that kind of goes back to this kind of thing you mentioned of the way sound, it's not something that we experience in the same way as sight, obviously. And you know, you mentioned that it passes through the body and reverberates within us. And I guess I've been thinking about this since, you know, I started working on the podcast, but you know, the way we can close our eyes and stop light from coming in, we can't really close our ears in the same way, obviously. So there is this sort of like invasion or immersion that we experience with sound in a different way. And I suppose I know that you've worked with sound before, but I mean, from what I understand, like visuals have been the kind of main part of your creative practice. And I guess I was wondering, like, if this project has revealed anything new to you about your work through the use of sound, or if it's like allowed you to open out new kind of ways of thinking because of it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that's come about. It wouldn't have happened because of like imposter syndrome and stuff like that, but the way it came about, I had been making my own soundtracks, and I started to do that because I was like, I love working with other people, but to give away the soundtrack felt like giving away 50% of the meaning, at least, you know, if not more. And sometimes this sounds like a very egotistical problem to have, but everyone's like, about my work, it's beautiful. But with sound, I can make it more sinister. And
yeah,
more full and more complex, I think.
I totally understand that. Yeah.
I mean, it's not a bad problem to have, but it's like
it takes on a new meaning.
Yeah. It's like adding this these layers of complexity and darkness. Dry spirits. And yeah, like I said about the thing, like sound passing through you, this physicality that I think it really anchors, to use your term, that imagery that can be a bit like too dreamlike and too, it can glide over you a little bit. When the sound, it like anchors you down a little bit.
For sure.
But yeah, I got into it, like, it's been quite a quick process, I had posted bits and pieces and people were like, oh, I love this. And then I posted one, and then Andy from Freezehead Records was like, oh yeah, we should put that out. So we're putting it out as a limited tape release, if anyone's interested after this.
Oh yes, it will be advertised throughout the podcast.
Yeah. And then this other guy, Andy, was like, who was also called Andy, funnily enough. He asked to put it on at this festival, like with the visuals as well, for this psychedelic mushroom thing. So it's like, it's been mainly people's response to it. I wouldn't have put it out particularly on my own merit, I don't think, but it's good. It's good that people like it.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me like such a natural evolution of your work to be able to achieve that, that sensory, physical, quality, but just in a different format. And it just, it adds a whole other dimension to the visuals, as you say. Like, it literally makes it like almost 4D or something, to have like two very clear senses of the same thing. It's just, I totally understand what you mean about, when you work with film and sound is just such a huge part of filmmaking that it is hard to give away that part of it, isn't it? Like, or to find someone who truly, because there are obviously, you could work with so many talented people, but you might have such a clear idea in your head, and it might just, you might be the only person that's able to do that thing that you want to do. So I totally understand that. I don't think it sounds egotistical at all.
No, and I grew up around so many talented musicians and like around good DIY scenes as well, and that sort of helped me with the confidence for it as well, like, and good experimental music people, amazing experimental music people. So to know that sort of thing was possible was a big part of it as well.
And it's always been around you. You probably just had to get to the right time to be able to do it yourself, and find your own, like, it's almost like your film is your instrument, it's like, it allows you to create the sound then.
Well, it is, because it's, but it feels inevitable now I've done it, but obviously it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, hindsight is a wonderful thing.
Fata Morgana.
don't we have so much more language for visuals than we do for sound?
Yeah.
Like, we obviously prioritize sight so much more than we do sound, and it's so funny to see that bias come out. It's been the same in every episode, I feel like, your brain almost has the words for visuals more than it does for sound.
And it's funny the way I made them so quickly at a time of like quite a lot of personal upheaval that I'm not sure that's where some of them come from. It does feel like some of them emerged from somewhere strange, I think my favorite ones are the darkest ones, to be honest.
Yeah, me too.
Just trying to like get that those really low tones and like that really embodied like resonant darkness. It's really fun to do. But I really do lack the language to talk about it because I don't know anything about it. I'm just trying to do what I think sounds good,
Totally.
But I have to say that Rob Shields has done an amazing job of mastering it as well. So he's made it sound like it was really good. I just heard it come back this week. It's like, oh, it's a real thing.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, like two of the tracks that really contrast for me was Silver. Is it Halides?
Halides, yes, I think.
Silver Halides, and the final track, Dark Aberrations, because Silver Halides has so many more like twinkling-y, kind of sparkling wind chime kind of sounds, and then Dark Aberrations is much deeper, and there's almost like a drone-like sound to it. I mean, there is a kind of constant drone type sound, isn't there? Not constant, but there is a deep sound that kind of goes throughout. But I think that the kind of pulsing drone in the last track kind of contrasted quite nicely for me with the Silver Halides one. So they stuck out in my brain as two that, were a good like yin and yang almost in a way.
Oh, that's cool, yeah. And then I guess... because like the silver, like going back to the materials, I guess one of them is like very much, oh, here is how the light is playing on the surface, and one is like, oh, here's the bones underneath it.
Yeah, because I listened to all of them, just through listening online. But it would be great to when it comes out. Is it coming out? What kind of form will it come out as? Will it be like
a cassette?
Amazing, perfect. That's what I was expecting. It'll be great to listen to them one after another in a kind of like on that physical, tape. I'll be looking forward to. Will there be copies available for people to purchase on?
Yes, yeah. Well, it'll be the pre-order should be available by the time this comes out. So,
okay, great.
Yeah, if you do, go to sapphiregoss.com/sound. Everything will be linked there. Some of the titles are taken from this book called Cyclonopedia by Reza Nagastani, and it's sort of like this Lovecraftian horror. It's not the easiest read. It's written in an Deleuzian academic style, but it's like about the Middle East and oil being like this buried chthonic entities that control world narratives and stuff. So yeah, it was. I thought in terms of like, these materials affecting the work, I thought of I'm sort of like working on something that's a bit more like that where the molecules are sort of affecting everything, that they are the actors, that they are that they control the narrative, basically. So
I know you said that you produced them really quickly and that there's some darkness and more darkness in some and more light in others. When you were kind of coming up with the chronology of the album, did you feel like there was a narrative from beginning to end in some form? I know that can be a really abstract thing in itself, but...
Yeah, well, I knew it had to start with whole complex because that's the sort of hole punch codes at the beginning of the reels and the end of the reels. So it definitely had to start or end with that. And I knew it had to end with Dark Aberrations because that's the longest and most epic, I guess.
Yeah.
And probably, yeah. And the one I've had most difficulty with because I sort of lack the musical talent really to do what I wanted to do with it, But hopefully it's getting there now. I think Rob's made it sound.
No, it's great. Yeah, I don't.
It's just my ambitions exceeded my,
Yeah, well, that's always a good.
Yeah. And then I think, it was a lot like, Yeah, maybe it was sort of going down into the depths of something, and then and a resurfacing, perhaps.
Yeah, it is like that light sparkling on the surface of the water and then kind of going under the surface as well.
Dark Aberrations.
You can find more from Sapphire at her website, sapphiregoss.com, and on her Instagram, at Sapphire Goss. And if you're interested in this particular project, you can visit sapphiregoss.com/sound, and then on Bandcamp at freezehead.bandcamp.com. All of the links to all of these will be in the episode description, as always. Listeners on Spotify are also able to experience the accompanying video to this episode by Sapphire herself, this time responding to her own sound. And you can also look back over every episode over the last 2 seasons to see every video work that Sapphire has made. And for listeners on other platforms, you can find all of Sapphire's work on our website, and all of this will also always be in the episode description. Thank you for listening to the Fermynwoods Contemporary Art Podcast. If you enjoy our podcast, please make sure to positively rate, review, and subscribe. It helps other people find the podcast, and it makes us feel good about ourselves. This episode has been curated by Subterra, presented by me, Marie-Chantal Hamrock, and edited by Astrid Björklund. Love and Light is Fermynwoods Contemporary Art's current thematic program. Visit fermynwoods.org for more information on this program and to sign up for our monthly email newsletter. And follow us at Fermynwoods on Instagram and Facebook. And make sure to check out myself and Astrid as Subterra at Subterrestrials on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening. With love and light, Marie and Astrid.